If people actually knew Michael Jackson's childhood after they were signed to Motown, they
I'm
would
gonna just
ask a whole
I'm
lot of questions
I'm
about
gonna
why he was the man that he was.
They had planned to do, and they planned to take my brother out, and my brother knew it. And that's why he told me repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly that this was going to happen to him.
These will be my final show performances in London. This will be it. This is it. And when I say this is it, it really means this is it.
It's been 15 years since Michael Jackson passed away, but his memory continues to live on in the hearts of his hardcore fans. His works have also outlived him, as his songs are being enjoyed across the globe as if they were released just yesterday. However, none of these trumps the controversies surrounding his passing. Over the 15 years since he went to be with his Lord, several controversies have popped up that I have lost count. It is as if every year brings different speculations regarding the circumstances under which the King of Pop was eliminated. Of course, some of them are pure as several entertainment blogs and channels are trying to cash out on the demise of one of the greatest musicians of all time. However, some of them appear to be based on concrete evidence, facts, and figures, which may not be available to the general public but paint a vivid picture of what actually happened to MJ. So it will be unwise to paint all of them with the same brush. One such revelation was recently dropped by Jaguar Wright, which has set the internet ablaze. Now, Jaguar Wright's disclosures might not be new, but they offer fans new insights into MJ's passing in the light of Diddy's current woes. I know y'all are wondering how Diddy's woes shed more light on MJ's passing, but hold your horses. First things first, what did Jaguar Wright say that has ignited hot discussions about MJ's demise? And how does it all feed into Diddy's current woes? I've got all the juice right here, so don't snooze or you might miss a core detail that ties everything together.
If people actually knew Michael Jackson's childhood after they were signed to Motown, they would ask a whole lot of questions about why he was the man that he was.
A few years ago, Jaguar Wright joined the Storm Monroe show, where she made some startling revelations about MJ's passing. The interview itself wasn't about Michael Jackson, but about the evil that the elite in the music industry perpetrated. Thus, she mentioned MJ's name briefly and said a few things about his passing that revealed a deep hidden secret that many people failed to notice at the time. Even fans who noticed what she said made nothing out of it because it didn't make sense then, but now it does, and I'll tell you why in a bit. During the interview, Wright claimed that Michael Jackson was a product of what he had suffered during his childhood and teenage years. She explained that the sensational musician had a rough childhood, which affected how he related to others when he became a star. And when he had got to the pinnacle of success, Hollywood tried to bring him down by using elements of his past to create fresh allegations against the pop star. To illustrate her point, Wright insinuated that Suzanne DePass, the woman who discovered the Jackson 5, handed MJ to the elites on a silver platter for their carnal pleasure while she pocketed the proceeds. She decried how several media outlets and documentaries hail the former president of Motown Records as a trailblazer and revolutionary, when in reality, she was the devil incarnate. In addition to Suzanne DePass, Wright also blamed MJ's father, Joe Jackson, for his negative influence on the precocious child prodigy. Joe Jackson was a strict disciplinarian who didn't fail to crack the whip when any of his children went astray. His strict training regime meant that the children grew up very low in self-confidence. This, many believe, is the reason for their soft-spoken nature. Though MJ has mounted almost every major stage across the world, he was known to be a quite soft-spoken individual who shunned the spotlight. However, if you're as successful as him, there's no place you can hide. If you don't believe me, at least you'll believe what Eddie Murphy said when Michael Jackson joined him and other celebrities to screen movies at his home. The 61-year-old comic was a longtime friend of Michael's and rose to fame making impressions of the singer on Saturday Night Live. But the King of Pop was nowhere near as outgoing as the actor. Eddie said he got so overwhelmed with nerves at a movie night in the home of Rat Pack star Sammy Davis Jr. that he hid behind a door. Yes, you heard right. MJ preferred to hide behind a door than mingle with his fellow Hollywood stars. In an interview with Jimmy Kimmel, Eddie Murphy narrated a party in the 1980s organized by Sammy Davis Jr. to screen the 1985 comedy film Cocoon, where the incident happened. It was too many people in the room. He was hiding behind the door. He said, "Eddie, come." When he got closer to the pop icon, he asked, "What the F, yo?" To which MJ responded, "It's too many people in there." Now, if that isn't typical of a person who lacks self-confidence, then what is? It might seem unheard of for someone who was as big as Michael Jackson, but if you consider what he went through during his childhood, according to Jaguar Wright, then everything makes sense. Michael Jackson is only one of numerous examples of how elites in the entertainment industry treat new and upcoming artists. The exploitation, SAR, and mistreatments usually have a long effect on these fresh wannabes. Sometimes these wannabes do the same when they finally reach the status of the elites, like in Diddy's case. Diddy allegedly received similar treatment from his mentor, Clive Davis. He was purportedly taken advantage of in a similar way to MJ, but instead of becoming timid, he became worse. He allegedly walked the same path that Clive Davis taught him and wreaked havoc on both men and women who were under his mentorship. Take a cursory look at all the allegations that have trailed him since last November, and you'll get a perfect picture of what he endured as an up-and-coming artist in the industry. Sadly, Michael Jackson's suffering didn't end when he became a star. It doubled. Everyone wanted to cheat him out of his hard-earned money, and when he wouldn't budge, they started to send him threats. Michael was becoming too big for the industry giants and the puppet masters. He was flying too close to the sun. Therefore, his wings had to be clipped. You might think all this is conjecture until you observe him during his final days on Earth. It isn't a coincidence that the King of Pop called his final tour, "This Is It." Of all the names and titles he could have chosen for his last tour, he settled on "This Is It." Now, that isn't the only unusual event. The way and manner in which he announced the tour also spoke volumes of whatever was going on behind the scenes. Fans noticed that he didn't say "this is it" in a celebratory manner that befitted a final tour. Instead, he said it in a way that indicated he was tired of fighting. Of course, we know Michael Jackson has anxiety issues, which has resulted in lackluster press conferences throughout his career. But this announcement was different. It appeared as if the King of Pop was sending a cryptic message to his fans, a message that he hoped they would decipher. For years, MJ had been fighting a secret battle with his label, Sony, and its chief executive at the time, Tommy Mottola. The label had been going back and forth with MJ over album sales, publishing rights, royalties, and a host of other things. However, it all came to a head in 2002 when Jackson openly called out Tommy Mottola and Sony for how they were treating him. At a fundraising event in London organized by Exeter, the speechless crooner called Mottola devil and announced that he was finally departing the label. "I just owe Sony one more album. It's just a box set, really," Jackson said to a throng of screaming fans. "So, I'm leaving Sony as a free agent, owning half of Sony. And I'm leaving them, and they are very angry because they never thought that this performer, myself, would outthink them." He repeated the attack a few months later at Reverend Al Sharpton's office in New York, where he addressed his fans on the happenings in the industry. Most of Jackson's comments were constrained to the overall treatment of black artists, the struggle of whom he said he shared. The pop star compared his troubles with his record company to those of artists who struggled financially, saying that there was an incredible injustice taking place. "The recording companies really do conspire against the artists," he said. "They steal, they cheat, they do everything they can, especially against the black artists. People from James Brown to Sammy Davis Jr., some of the real pioneers that inspired me to be an entertainer. These artists are always on tour, because if they stop touring, they will go hungry. If you fight for me, you're fighting for all black people, D and alive." Michael Jackson then turned his attention to Tommy Mottola, insinuating that the music executive had used the N-word on him a couple of times. He then waved a picture of Tommy Mottola wearing horns and called him devilish. Many wondered why the once soft-spoken gentleman suddenly flipped into an angry, vengeful person out for his pound of flesh. He obviously had seen and suffered enough and had had it up to his neck. So, it was time to act. And the only way was to let the whole world know what was going on between him and the label. Deep Throat sources indicate that immediately after Michael Jackson's rant at Al Sharpton's office, Hollywood and Sony's PR machine kicked into gear. They heaped all the blame on MJ's head, accusing him of low album sales and being a liability to them. According to Sony, they spent about $30 million to produce MJ's album Invincible and spent an extra $25 million to market it. However, only 2 singles and 1 video from the album were released. Now, Sony needed to recoup all the money it had pumped into the project, and therefore scheduled a few tours for MJ. However, he refused to honor those tours and instead did a few interviews to promote the album. Though the album sold 6 million copies worldwide and was certified double platinum, it wasn't profitable. Thus, Mottola was on Jackson's neck to fulfill his part of the bargain so that he could at least recoup all the money spent during production. However, many fans weren't digging this explanation, so a few of them came up with their own theories. Some fans claimed the whole Mottola Jackson issue started when the King of Pop decided to create a movie studio named DreamWorks. He sold that idea to 2 industry executives, Steven Spielberg and David Geffen, and later to Sony. They were all interested and decided to go on with the plan, but things went south when Geffen started making passes at MJ. The smooth crooner wasn't interested, and this resulted in a divide between him and the others because Geffen and Spielberg were allegedly members of a powerful gay club in the entertainment industry. Thus, spurning one's advances was seen as a rejection of the group, so the other members opted out of the project and left MJ alone to continue. This explains why no one came to his aid when he literally called out for help because he had offended the elite. Some of his friends were afraid to take on the elite for fear of being lowballed or even blackballed. Needless to say, Geffen then went on to found DreamWorks Studios with Spielberg in 1994. Thus, he was left on his own. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Here's where the plot thickens. According to some fans, MJ made a smart move by purchasing a part of Sony in 1985, which gave him a competitive advantage. They realized that the singer had outsmarted them and urged him to rescind his actions and decision, but the musician wouldn't budge. Thus, they placed him in compromising situations with the aim of painting him black in the eyes of his fans. They set him up with young boys and spun several stories, indicating that he had mistreated them one way or the other. Then they got their parents to sue MJ one after the other till he spent all his money on lawyer fees and out-of-court settlements. The idea was to milk him dry and force him to either sell or relinquish his stake in Sony, but the speechless crooner held on. According to the fans, when Sony realized MJ was out of money, they intentionally lent him some with the option of using his assets as collateral. This went on for years until the Billie Jean singer was almost bankrupt. Then they came up with the idea of touring with his last album, Invincible, to make enough money to pay his debts. Knowing that Michael was backed up in a tight corner, they scheduled the tour in such a way that he couldn't physically survive it. If he refused it, they would seize all his assets. Also, the tour couldn't be insured because of Jackson's many health concerns, putting the promoters at risk. If MJ didn't finish the tour, then there'll be a huge debt to pay. Considering all these, everyone felt MJ was better off unalive than alive, because he would continue to create debt for his business partners. But if he were unalive, they could sell his assets and use his pre-existing to cover the rest. So that was when the plan to end Michael Jackson's life was hatched, at least in Jaguar Wright's opinion. However, she explained that the planners had to be crafty because the least mistake could backfire spectacularly since the MJ had one biggest fan bases in the world. If he wasn't unalived with tact and the whole incident circled back to them, they could lose the label as many fans would boycott their album sales and promotions. Plus, they may not get their hands on his insurance and other claims if it is realized that they had a hand in his demise. Thus, they had to make sure the whole incident didn't lead back to them. To achieve this, they needed a fall guy, someone with no ties to them but extremely close to MJ, who could carry out the deed without drawing attention to the real perpetrators, someone who they could influence with money and the promise of protection from prison. They found their perfect victim in Dr. Conrad Murray, who had been working as MJ's personal physician since May 2009. Murray had had many financial troubles and, according to some blogs, owed several institutions hundreds of thousands of dollars. He owed child support, couldn't pay his bills, had defaulted on student loans, and owed his borrowers who were after him. He needed cash as soon as possible to clear the debts and get the debtors off his back. So when the call came to join Michael Jackson's medical team, he grabbed it as a toddler would grab his birthday present. According to unconfirmed sources, the elites called up the good doctor and sold their plans to him, but he was afraid of the repercussions on his career, family, and, most importantly, his life. But the perpetrators assured him that they would give him enough money to settle him for the rest of his life. They also guaranteed he wouldn't have his license revoked, despite intense pressure from fans and other professionals, because the plan would absolve him of serious charges. Finally, the perpetrators promised experienced lawyers who would ensure he didn't get nailed for MJ's demise and would get a reduced sentence in the worst-case scenario. Finally, he accepted the job and executed it the following month after his employment with MJ began. On June 25, 2009, MJ was found unalive in his rented mansion in Holmby Hills, Los Angeles. When the paramedics arrived, they ruled the cause of his demise as cardiac arrest triggered by an overdose of propofol and benzodiazepine. Here's the interesting part. Michael Jackson didn't self-administer the medications, but they were prescribed and administered by the doctor. Apparently, the musician had been wandering all night, struggling to sleep, and needed some medications to help him along. Thus, Dr. Conrad Murray gave him propofol, lorazepam, and midazolam. He then left the musician only to return a few hours later to discover that he had passed out. He called 911, who rushed to the scene to meet Jackson still breathing, and the paramedics started CPR while en route to the Ronald Reagan UCLA UCLA Medical Center. On arriving at the residence, the King of Pop was gone. The announcement of his death sent shockwaves across the globe, crashing many websites including Google, AOL Instant Messenger, Wikipedia, and Twitter. Many fans didn't believe the news as they were highly anticipating his This Is It tour, scheduled to kick off in 3 weeks. However, what was more surprising was the shocking discovery that was made when investigations opened into MJ's demise. One of the bone-chilling revelations was that the doctor had administered a high dose of powerful anesthesia not for sleep. The doctor himself admitted during cross-examination that Michael Jackson was unable to sleep and needed some sleeping pills to help him along. However, why he gave him an anesthetic instead of a sleeping pill baffled everyone. To make matters worse, the anesthetic propofol was supposed to be administered on the orders of an anesthesiologist, critical care physician, or an emergency medicine physician who received extensive training in the use and monitoring of anesthetics. Murray had no such specialty training. So why Dr. Murray gave him this still beats anyone's imagination. Now, his defense was that the pop icon had become dependent on the sleeping pills, and he was trying to wean him off it. He also claimed that Michael Jackson specifically requested to be given the propofol to help him sleep. These discoveries were as shocking as they were unbelievable. Even with the alleged careful planning of MJ's demise, the perpetrators were not able to pull it off without drama. Conrad Murray was formally charged with involuntary manslaughter in 2011 and was convicted of the same charge in the same year. He then received the maximum sentence of years for the crime, and his medical licenses were revoked or suspended. However, after serving 2 years of his sentence, Murray was released on parole. These discoveries spawned the many conspiracy theories that have since blighted the passing of one of the best musicians of all time. LaToya Jackson, the elder sister of Michael Jackson, also joined in the fray as she believed that the doctor was in on the act all along. In fact, she started the campaign when the first court date was announced. LaToya Jackson, who arrived in court carrying a sunflower, which was Michael's favorite flower, sent a torrent of tweets berating the evidence that was being presented in court. "This is all a big conspiracy, and the doctor knows what happened," the 55-year-old singer wrote on her Twitter account during a break in proceedings. She even tweeted encouraging witnesses to come out and testify against the doctor so he received a stiffer punishment. "There are wives, girlfriends, and employees who know exactly what happened to Michael. Please come forward and tell what really happened. Michael worked his entire life for his children. Please help us get justice. Dr. Murray is a very small piece of the puzzle," she wrote. "I feel like screaming. Murray knows exactly what happened at Carrollwood and who else is behind all of this." She felt that by getting Dr. Murray to a harsher sentence, she could get him to talk so that he would reveal all those behind her brother's demise and bring them to book. She waged a relentless campaign on Twitter, hoping to win the attention and sympathy of witnesses. She even appeared to suggest to the court how to conduct the proceedings when she wrote, "Whenever someone is eliminated, you follow the money trail and you see who has the most to gain. Those are normally the ones responsible." Even when some witnesses took the stand and gave testimonies that didn't go her way, she tweeted. For instance, when Michael Jackson's choreographer, Kenny Ortega, testified, LaToya thought he wasn't forthcoming with the full details. So she tweeted, "There's much more to Ortega's story, and he knows it." She agreed with the many conspiracy theorists that her brother's demise was orchestrated to get a hold of his estate, and therefore was hell-bent on bringing the perpetrators to book. She even quelled counter rumors that seemed to suggest that her family eliminated MJ so they could control his estate. She tweeted, "The family has absolutely nothing to do with his estate." Interestingly, MJ's daughter, Paris Jackson, seems to agree with her aunt about her father's demise. She was just 11 years old when her father passed away due to a cardiac arrest and probably didn't understand what was at play then. But when she recently sat down with Rolling Stone in 2017, the then 19-year-old Paris was convinced that the father was eliminated. She explained that her father would occasionally hint that some people had placed a target on his back. He would drop hints about people being out to get him, and at some point he was like, "They're gonna kill me one day." When the interviewer specifically asked if she thought her father was eliminated by some unscrupulous persons, Paris Jackson didn't mince words. "Absolutely," she replied, "because it's obvious. All arrows point to that. It sounds like a total conspiracy theory, but all real fans and everybody in the family knows it. It was a setup." The then teenager then made a startling revelation that drew everyone's attention but could put her in harm's way if she wasn't careful. She claimed many people were after her father, but she was playing a chess game that would end in bringing the people to justice. She refused to name the people she suspected engineered her father's demise, not even Dr. Conrad Murray, but she hoped to fight for justice for her dad. She went on to speak glowingly of her father, especially his parenting skills, details, describing him as a great cook who loved to use cuss words. She also dismissed speculations that she wasn't Jackson's child and claimed that she was black, although her appearance was white. "He is my father," she said. "He will always be my father. He never wasn't, and he never will not be. People who knew him really well say they see him in me, that it's almost scary. I consider myself black," she continued, adding that her father would look me in the eyes and he'd point his finger at me and he'd be like, "You're black. Be proud of your roots." Paris Jackson will forever be remembered for the emotional and spontaneous speech delivered at the memorial service of her dad in 2009. The then 11-year-old Paris seized the microphone and let her heart speak for the first time after her father's demise. "I just wanted to say, ever since I was born, Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine," she said. "And I just wanted to say I love him so much." She then turned around and fell into the arms of her aunt, Janet Jackson, as she continued to sob uncontrollably. Her tears moved the millions of fans across the globe as they mourned the demise of their beloved icon. And to add salt to injury, the family and fans of the pop icon might never get closure, as the alleged perpetrators of this heinous crime might never be brought to book. For now, people like Jaguar Wright can do nothing but drop bombshell revelations about MJ's passing, hoping that one day the culprits will be caught and imprisoned. This brings us to the end of today's video. Thanks for watching.